Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time again where we shall do a tier list. There's been a big patch. A lot has changed. In the future, we can definitely do a mod tier list, Liz. Definitely can. Now, a lot has changed, which makes this kind of interesting, because is Zushi still ahead of the pack, ahead of the rest? Not sure. I'd actually go with no. And I'll go into detail in a lot of things, but there's been so little time since the patch that we're still all kind of not super aware of where these stand. But S tier, we still have to absolutely put Roos as S tier. And the thing about Roos that makes them very good is they don't really have a weak matchup, which is such a nice position to be in. Like, worst case scenario for Roos, certain maps for sure can be bad. Like, would you want to play Roos on Canal? Absolutely not. But in general, like tournament maps that we very regularly play, Roos is solid. It will have some of those weird maps as well, where there's like not that much wildlife, which definitely hurts Roos. But overall, Roos, I can't really, off the top of my head, think of a bad matchup for it. It's just at least 50-50 with everything, or slightly favoured. And again, that's just what a comfortable civ and position. And as far as the well-roundedness of it, it's good at the start, it's good in the middle, it's good at the end. Great eco, great army, banging. So it's got that very nice step-by-step progress. Now, this next civ I'm going to list, I initially put it in A tier, but just as time's gone on, I feel it's a scary lad. I'm actually going to put Ottoman in S tier as well for now. I didn't do this before, because I still think Ottoman does have some matchups that it doesn't quite like. So when I think about Ottoman in the past, one massive buff that Ottoman got was when their Greater Bombards became 3 supply and their Age 4 landmark became like 100% increased production. And since, I think the Greater Bombard is back to 4 supply, but people have really discovered that Janissaries are just a very good unit. Like, even though they are a specialty anti-cav unit, they're good against everything. And if you've got like an archer-based army, as long as you have a good amount of units as Ottoman, it's still very hard to snipe them all down. And also people have been utilizing Vizier points better, like getting 10 Jannies out for a timing. Like, Ottoman can potentially do it all. Weakest matchups, English can be tricky early on for sure, especially depending on the map and the woodlines. China can actually be a little bit problematic as well. Like, it's hard to stop China, and by China I mean regular China. And I know people might be like, what? I think regular China, given that they buffed them a bit, the Imperial Academy, their Age 2 landmark, I know I'm going off track here a little bit, their Imperial officials are 30% cheaper, meaning instead of 100 to 50 food gold, they're now 70-35. It's fairly significant. Alrighty. In terms of S tier civs, I think that pretty much covers S tier for now. A tier. Now this is where it gets a bit tricky for me, because I'm like, I'm going to have to put Iobids up there, even though they had this nerf recently. I still think they're pretty solid, man. I think they're pretty solid. And honestly, I think they can still do their fast tech stuff, like Fast Castle, except maybe now. And I was kind of leaning towards it a little bit anyway. So the cost went from like 850 gold to 450 gold, or 850 food to 450 gold to 900, 500. So it's not that much more expensive, and it takes like, I don't know what the numbers are exactly, like 12 seconds more or something. So it's not that big of a nerf, But also the 3 Dervish one that you can get is very good with that. So I still think Ayabid's is very solid. I would have to put Delhi up here as well. Maybe Delhi even better. Delhi's still just good. You know, they are probably the civ that has changed the absolute least through time. I played Delhi in the tournament and had a long game against Anatand where I had like 20 plus scholars. So when I hit Imperial, I got all the upgrades instantly. I just plonked down like 3 universities, and you know, I still think Delhi's good. And as we keep learning how to play it later on, because right now it's just so good in feudal that it's almost like no point in going ahead, but I actually think it's pretty well rounded as well these days. Next civs. I have to put Malian up here. I still think Malian's a very good civ. Like, the thing about Malian, in terms of like what is its hard counter, you could say Ottoman is definitely a counter to it, but there are Malian players that will beat Ottoman players, even now to this day. Against Rus, it's like a very slightly Rus favoured. Again, Malian players can beat Rus. Some people think Delhi beats Malian, but I don't really. I think it's down to the players. And I definitely think Malian can fight Ayabid. But one thing about Malian that's very nice, I feel that Malian poops, absolutely poops, on Jeanne d'Arc and French. It also beats English quite hard. In fact, a lot of civs Malian, because Malian can be rich, and in that Sofa timing, at age 3, it's really powerful. Really powerful. Alrighty, so that's A tier for now. I'm thinking, because is that all my A tiers here? It might just be. I mean, like, the fact that, like, this is a tricky one, because we've got Byzantine, we've got Zhu Shi still. Has Zhu Shi literally dropped from being arguably the best to lower than A? Would I prefer to play Zhu Shi or Byzantine in a tournament? Or Japanese? Or English? Alright. I think I'm going to be a little bit wild here. Because again, I have to think like, alright, if I'm Zhu Shi against Malian, feels a bit weird. Zhu Shi against Delhi can feel a bit weird. Zhu Shi against Ayabids feels pretty okay for Zhu Shi. Against Ottoman I don't like it, and against Rus I like it less now. Byzantine. I think Byzantine can fight Malian. Can somewhat fight Delhi. Definitely fight Ayabid. Can kind of fight these as well. English doesn't like this, doesn't like this. It's alright against this. It's good against this. Doesn't like this. And Japan? I think we have to put Byzantine here. The fact that we can sort of fight against most of these without being too bad, but also we can definitely do well against other civs. Yeah, I have to put them there. And can I put Zhu Shi as advantage as these guys? I think Zhu Shi right now has a few matchups which it just doesn't like playing against. But I think I'm gonna have to put Mongol there as well, just because of how like specially niche they are against certain things. Like, they're still freaking annoying. Or is it lower? Man, what a funny situation. Like, yeah, I think that's actually going to cover my A tier for now. I can't realistically, in good faith, put Zhu Shi on A tier at the moment. I still think they're solid, but I don't think they're that solid. Okay, next civs. Alright. I'm going to have to put English here. There's going to be quite a few on B. And we're doing quite a few here, now that I think about it. The reason I've done it like this... So I think Rus and Ottoman, very, very good. Rus literally has no bad matchup that I can think of. And it has some matchups that are definitely a little bit favoured for it. So in general, Rus is like super well-rounded. Ottoman, some very decent matchups for sure. Like it matches up very nicely against Malian. It can fight against Rus. It can fight against nearly everything. Has some matchups that are a bit rough, like against Delhi can be rough, just because Delhi's very good in feudal. And if they get a lead there, it's rough. Against English can be rough as well. Jeanne d'Arc to some degree. Once you get Jannies, it's great for you, but yeah, it's not all roses, but So yeah, Mongol's good at just kind of restricting and stopping a game, and then you have to play Mongol's game. Okay. English. I'll put English as the leader on the B tier, just because English is freaking annoying. Like sometimes, depending on map layout, you can have English just do insanely well. Now, I don't like it against Delhi or Rus, for example. Against Ayabid, it can fight. Against Ottoman, it can absolutely fight. Against Malian, I don't like it. Against Byzantine, that's a weird one. Depending on map, let's say you played on like the old Rocky River, where you have one berry patch and then you have to go to the middle. Quite alright for English, or a Himiyama. English against Mongol is also a weird one, but in general, English is one of those that it's a nice civ to have in your draft, because it can stop you from picking a certain civ on a certain map. So in that respect, English is nice. Japan. Japan is starting to become fairly decent on these land maps, especially with these fast samurai builds. They just had a massive overhaul with their monks and what have you. I still think the monks aren't as good. Monks, one of their issues, even though they provide gold per minute, they have a lot of overlap on their spell. So if you cast the spell which reduces damage by 50%, they don't all pick an individual unit. What ends up happening is you can have like 6 monks cast on the first unit, and then you've just wasted 5 spells. So it's not yet tuned correctly, I feel, but in general the Shinto priest one is much better. Jeanne d'Arc, obviously she's a homie, isn't she? She can still like restrict people. It's definitely been nerfed, but it's still strong. They slow down the getting to level 3 by no wolves. And they slow down some of the damages that she can deal, but she's still very useful. Zushi. Quite large nerfs. Meditation Garden, no longer as potent. So the gold, the stone income is less, so is the berries. The wood stay the same, and also the radius is slightly smaller. And then one of the big things that they altered was the wood. The reduced wood. It doesn't affect all buildings now. So towers are no longer like, 60 wood? They're now 100. And I think things like blacksmith are no longer like 90 wood. They're back to 150. I think it's just the eco building. So yeah, the wood amount got nerfed, and also which buildings. So I mean, right now, if you ask me, like, if you're a lot of these civs against Zushi, I absolutely think you can be at advantage. So yeah, not as strong anymore. Alright, C tier. What do I class as the best now of these bad boys? Because I think in most people's minds, it could be like Aber French Order as the bottom 3. And you know what? I think I'll do this. I've played some games with French or China recently, and they definitely feel smoother. I'm still not entirely sure where they stack up. I might even put China in B tier, actually. Might even put them in B. I am not sure if Zushi is better than China anymore. And in fact, I can see a lot of situations I'd actually prefer to pick China over Zushi. I think this is how I would do that. Which is very funny, because I don't know what else. So they did some siege.
Hello, Esser.
Thank you, thank you. They did some changes where siege is now different. Like Springolds fire faster, but they do slightly less damage. Other siege has more range armor, so it takes a bit longer to kill in general. But that definitely is an indirect buff to the clock tower bombard or clock tower stuff. But I also think getting 3 Imperial officials for overall 90 food and 45 gold less early on is definitely a big deal. Yeah, I'll put China there. There's a good question in chat. Like, what points do I take into account if I'm picking Zushi or China? So I think now Zushi is extremely reliant on a longer feudal and dealing damage and slowing down an opponent. But right now I think we're in a very aggressive meta in which if you're against Rus, they can fight you. Ottoman, they have a meta aura, so they can absolutely fight you. Delhi's a feudal fighter. Byzantine can be a feudal fighter, as can Malian these days. English, I feel that they just shut you down before you get going. China, you have a good eco. You have the Barbican. Like, you don't... With China, you don't need to go 2 TC to be economically ahead. Because you'll build workers a bit faster with Song. You'll also have the Barbican, which can save you. And if it is more of a feudal meta, staying feudal for longer with China is more beneficial than Zhu Shi. You build workers faster. You can also get those imperial officials without stopping your villager production. Like, those are... And they're cheaper. Granted, your farms and stuff are more expensive, but if it's a feudal meta, you don't rely on the farms as much. Yeah, I'd almost put China above, but I can't do that with a clear conscience just yet. But it might just be. Alrighty. Is that for C tier? I would class Hatchery as better than the other 3, so I think I have to. I'm doing it. French, does French belong there? Try class order is better than French. This is actually really tricky. This is really tricky. Maybe I'm not sure. This is... This is one where I'm... Would Order beat Abbasid if they play them? Should they be there? This is so tricky. Because now I'm starting to think, like, if I had... Let's say I go up against... let's say I'm against Japan. Would I rather have Hatchery or Order? I'd rather have Hatchery. If I'm against... Yeah, we're going like this. I'd rather have Hatchery. So these guys are my bottom civs. Long gone are the days of the French, where they just were so damn good for so long. We're going through an aggressive time at the moment. So if you play against, like, Iabids or Byzantine, like... There's so many counters to Cav these days. Like, just being able to get a Desert Raider out early on, and then into Camel Lancers, well, that's rough. Like, French wants to build Knights and Horsemen. Horsemen don't really come online until Age 3 and beyond for French, but they do have some of the best crossbows, but if you can go Jaune, it's like, why would you go French right now? All these civs have a strong Age 2, with a very, very, very obvious counter to the Knight, right? Like, Rus, you don't need to really do much. You have a better eco. Ottoman, you have the meta. You have all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think this is what I'll stick with for my tier list for now. I think this is fairly solid overall. Though I am absolutely most likely going to change my opinion after today, after I play my tournament games later. Just because Zushi and China right now are a little bit... Oh, screw me. A little bit funny for me. I'm not entirely sure which one's stronger right now. I like the idea of English and Japan being my kind of like... They are the middle-ish ground, sort of. Yeah, pretty... Solid tier list, solid tier list. So, hold on. I'll clap again. That is the end of this tier list, team. The end of this tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you did. I hope you did. Alrighty, alrighty.